Seed starting is easy, but there are some important things you need to know, and that's what we're going to go over in this video today. Getting greens in the ground, because they're great for springtime and great for the winter, doesn't matter where in the world you are, they're going to be perfect for you, is going to give you a leg up on your chicken feed costs as well, because chickens love eating greens. They're easy to grow and people can eat them too. So we're going to go over everything you need to know to get growing now. The seasons are changing, and that means it is time to start your seeds. So for my Northern Hemisphere viewers, you're coming into springtime. It's time to think about the growing season ahead. What are you going to choose to put in the garden this year? And for my Southern Hemisphere viewers, we're heading into the winter, including me here in New Zealand. So we've got to think about what crops we want to have in the garden for the late autumn and on into the winter. Starting seeds is pretty simple, but there are some very important things you need to know to be successful, and that's what we're going to go over in this video today. Great thing to get started right now is a whole range of greens to grow in your garden, which your chickens will enjoy, and that is a great way to offset feed costs, which can add up over time. Chickens absolutely love a whole range of green leafy vegetables, and whether it is springtime or autumn time, that is the prime time for green leafy vegetables. So let's look at how to get those seeds started and out into the garden. The easiest part of starting seeds is popping the seed onto the soil and covering it up a little bit. That's the easy bit. Everyone can do that, but that's not where people have problems when they start seeds. Where people have problems is not understanding warmth, light, and moisture. Today I'm going to focus on starting seeds inside, because that's the trickier bit, and that's what most people are going to get caught up on, because it is a bit complicated. The theory is simple, but the execution is complicated when starting seeds inside. And I know a lot of people have tried and failed at doing that in the past. So this video is meant to set you up for success so you can hit it with confidence and know that you're going to get a good result. So the first thing that we need to think about when starting seeds is warmth. All seeds need warmth in order to germinate. Different types of seeds need different warmth, and if you want to get really into it, you can look up the germination temperatures for the seeds you're going to plant. I don't worry too much about that because I always have a whole bunch of different things going at once. I just use a heating tray. So the one I have is fully enclosed. You just plug it in. It doesn't have temperature control. It just raises the temperature by about 10 degrees, that's Celsius, and there we go. It heats up the bottom of the trays so that my seeds will get some warmth. So I'll show you what this looks like when it's all set up inside in my little seed starting area. So what it does is it comes with these little seed starting trays. So I brought it all as one package. I have 2 of these units, so I can start as many seeds as I like, which it's probably maybe not a good idea because I tend to go a little overboard, but it gives me options. So at the moment, all of what I have here, I have actually started outside, because here in New Zealand at the moment, we're just coming into the autumn. So it's still totally fine to start seeds outside. And I am, of course, not starting anything particularly heat sensitive because it's going to be winter soon. So all of these are lettuces and brassicas basically. And this one here that's not doing much of anything right now is spinach, and I think that seed might have been a bit too old, and we're going to talk about fresh seed a little bit later in the video. So what the tray looks like is like this, and the heat is at the bottom coming up with the plants. And of course, if you've just set your seed up in there, there's nothing green. Nothing's come up yet. You're still wondering to yourself, will anything grow? So the second part of what we need to think about when starting seeds is moisture. So warmth and moisture. So in terms of moisture management, I like to use these little plant hats. Now mine came with this set, so they all fit, but these are very, very common. You can find them anywhere. Usually you can buy the tray and the hat as one unit, and they have a little slidey dial that lets you control how much airflow can go in and out. I live in a very humid climate, so I only use my plant hats, and I use them fully open. I only use them until I see that the seed has germinated. When a little bit of green starts coming up, then I take the plant hats off, because otherwise I'm going to have too much humidity for my seedlings to be healthy. But if you live in a drier climate, or your house is quite dry in the areas where you're starting your seeds, you might want to leave them on for longer. You might need to close the dial in the initial, and maybe you need to take them off in the daytime, put them on at nighttime. This is all about the art of starting seeds. The components to it sound easy, but the actual application, you need to be observing and thinking and trying things. But it's not that hard. You will be successful. So, and also in terms of moisture management is how you're going to keep your seeds evenly moist while they germinate. To start with, so this is before any green has come up, you're sitting there, you're waiting, you don't know if they're gonna come up or not, I use a spray bottle to keep the surface of the little trays damp. Well, just moist really. You don't want it to be dripping wet, but you want it to be moist all the time. And with your spray bottle, I would highly recommend getting one that sprays from any direction. So this one, it will spray upside down, it will spray sideways, it will spray in the ordinary direction. That's super, super handy, because you will find you've got to get into strange areas, and maybe one tray needs more water than another. So get one that you can spray from any direction. And what you're going to do is just spray the surface. I tend to spray mine once in the morning, once in the evening. If I happen to be walking by in the daytime and they look a little dry, I might spray them again. But you need to do it more than once a day until you get that germination coming up. You're seeing the green in the tray. So that is how you start off. But once your seeds are up, they're peeking out of the soil, they're looking good, you want to switch to predominantly watering from the bottom. Now, with my setup here with this fully enclosed tray, it is not recommended to put water directly onto the heating surface. So because electricity and water shouldn't mix, I follow those instructions. What I do is I take my little trays and I pop them into a tray that I can put water into. So I just pop them out, and this is not every day. This is like every second day, maybe every third day, just depending on how they go. But remember, my climate is very humid, so your seedlings might dry out faster than mine do. So I pop them in, I put water into the bottom of the tray, I leave them for a couple of minutes to absorb the water into the bottom, into the soil at the bottom of the trays, and then I give them a little shake to get the water off, and they go back onto the heat. So what that does, it's when you're doing your bottom watering, is it puts the water to the bottom so that your little seedling wants to put their roots down to the water. If you water from the top all the time, and there's nothing wrong with watering from the top every so often, but most of your watering you should try to do it from the bottom, because you want the root system to stretch down to the water and get strong, and expect to find water from below rather than coming from the top, because once your little seedling goes out to the garden, that's where you want it to find the water. You want it to stretch down and look for the water deep in the soil. So that is how you want to water them. So we have talked about warmth, we have talked about moisture, now we need to talk about light. Now this is an area that can be very challenging because a lot of people try to start their seeds on a windowsill or a table with some sunlight coming through, and that can work, but you're not going to have guaranteed success doing it that way. You most likely are going to need supplemental light. So what I use in my system, so my tray's in there, maybe 2 trays are in there depending on how much self-control I have had, is I use these relatively cheap little grow lights, and all they are is a combination of blue and red LED lights. And my ones have a clip, so I sort of have to do some interesting shenanigans to get them to go and do what I want, but I make it work. And they are going to come down as close as possible to where the seedlings have got to. So if the plant hats are still on, then the lights are essentially sitting on top of the plant hats. And then when the hats come off, I drop them a little lower. And as the seedlings grow up, I lift the lights up away from them. Now, these lights are totally fine if your plants are also getting some natural light. So where I start my seeds off is quite sunny, the light comes in, they get light, it's sort of the winter or early spring, so they might get maybe 6 hours of natural light coming in there. But I leave these lights on for about 14 hours a day. Now, I am not too precise because that's just how I roll. If you are someone who likes to be very precise, you could put the lights on a timer. But what I do is I turn them on in the morning when I get up and I'm making a cup of tea. So that's probably 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, the lights go on, and I turn them off when I am heading to bed or that I'm not going to want to deal with the plants anymore. So maybe 9 o'clock in the evening. So they get that amount of light. And it might be a bit variable depending on if it's the weekend or what I've got going on, but they need a lot of light. People often don't realize that they need that much light. So, I mean, you can leave it on for longer than that. Absolutely, they could have 18 hours of light, but from there you probably want a timer because I need to sleep more than that. So I just turn them on and turn them off at the beginning and the end of the day. So these lights are just a cheap sort of AliExpress, Amazon light. I think they cost me about $30. I have 2 sets of them, so I've got all the light. Now, if you are growing in a situation where you don't have the natural light coming through and you are wondering if these will be enough, well, the answer probably is that they won't be enough. If you're trying to start them seeds in your basement or something like that, you're going to need to look at a more powerful light that has a broader spectrum that is going to cost more money, unfortunately. So if you can find a spot where you've got some natural light, I would say try and get your seeds started there. But seed starting equipment is an investment. It's going to last for years. So even if you have to spend a bit more on getting a really good grow light, I would say go ahead and do it because that one-off investment is going to give you success with your seeds year after year after year. And a lot of time goes into this. And time is valuable. So if you're going to have some failures, you have to redo it, you might miss your window. So good equipment is absolutely worth getting. On that note of good equipment being a good investment, being able to successfully start your seeds every year is going to save you potentially huge amounts of money over the long term because, well, food's not getting any cheaper. And you can also make sure that you're starting seeds that your chicken flock can eat, and that can start forming a portion of their diet. Even if it's not forming a lot of the energy component of their diet, it's going to give them vitamins and minerals and variety, and all of that goodness is going to come through to their eggs for you to eat as well. And that is fantastic. Chickens are great at using up all the bits and pieces that humans don't particularly want to eat. Maybe you've had some insect damage or something like that. Chickens are very happy to eat the damaged crops, especially if it still has some insects left on it. So a great way to help your own grocery bill out and your chicken feed bill. The next thing we need to talk about is the seed raising mix that you're going to use. Now, I make my own, and you can see what I do in my living soil potting mix video, but it's really important to use a good quality seed starting mix because, like you're just seeing, it takes time, it takes money, it takes effort to make this happen. So you don't want to use a cheap or not very good starting mix to get started with. So I make my own. It is my chicken yard compost and worm castings and whatever bits and pieces I have. And that is great, and if you are set up to make your own, go ahead and do that. I do not find any issue with some lumps and rocks and bits of big stuff in my mix. I've started all sorts of different seeds and not had a problem, so I would say you don't need to worry about the mix being really fine. But you want to, if you're buying your seed starting mix, you want to go for an organic one. And that's not because you should only use organic. You can use whatever you feel like. But non-organic seed starting mixes might have fungicides in them. And that's designed to stop any sort of issues happening with your seed. But I say you're better to see if your seeds and your plants are going to die before you put them out in the garden. And they're going to be exposed to all sorts of different things once they go out into the soil. So you do want to see if they're going to go ahead and make it before you've even invested more time into getting them in the garden. And you also have beneficial fungi in the soil, which you want to keep. And a fungicide is going to knock out the beneficial as well as the not beneficial. So I always pick organic seed starting mix if I'm going to buy it. I think it's super important. You may or may not think it's super important, but I want my plants to go out in the garden and be strong and healthy all on their own. I do not want to baby them all season long. I said at the beginning of the video that the easiest part in all of this is putting the seed onto the soil. So I'm just going to show you what I do to put the seeds on. So I have filled my little tray here with the potting mix that I made myself, and I just sprinkle the seeds over the surface. It's that simple. You can do it any way you want to. You can do individual seed trays, so each little seed goes in by itself. I like to use the scatter tray method, and once the seeds are on, I just put a small amount of soil over the top, tamp it down very gently, and that's it. That's all I do. And my mix is already damp, so I've dampened it up to the point that I want, so I am not putting the water on to the seeds afterwards because that might make them move around and shift. It's already damp, it's ready to go. Plant hat goes onto the heat, and I cross my fingers that I've used good fresh seed, which is quite difficult to know. When you're talking seed, you want to make sure you're getting it from a supplier that has a good reputation for having good seed. So for me, I like to use local companies wherever possible, and they're usually selling seed that is from that season that they've saved. So that's what I like to do. You might have to try out a few companies, a few different brands until you find something that works consistently well for you, but it is important that the quality and the freshness of your seed is good because, again, a lot of time and effort and investment, you want to set yourself up for success. One thing that is super important when starting your seeds, and it actually has nothing to do with the actual starting, is self-control. It's very exciting when you're coming in towards the growing season again and you want to get started and you've been waiting all winter and you're just itching to get out into the garden and you want to start all the seeds right now. Take a breath, really think about it. Start off with your greens that can go out into the garden very quickly. So that's sort of what I'm doing here for my winter crops, which are great spring crops also. I've got my brassicas, that's some red bok choy here. There's some cabbage in there, there's some lettuces. Things like that are going to be much happier going out into the garden when it's still quite chilly. So you need to think about your climate. How long might you have snow and frosts for? If you start your tomatoes and your peppers really early, you're going to have them inside for a really long time. And that's fine when they're in the little trays, but you're going to have to pot them on. And I have a video all about how to pot on your seedlings from the seed trays. You're going to pot them on, and my favorite way to do that is actually to use toilet roll tubes in a container that has some holes in the bottom so I can bottom water them. But this has 9 plants, so you're going to go from a tray that might have 20 plants into something that's already the size of 2 trays that only fits 9 plants. So suddenly, your plant area is expanding dramatically. So you want to be pretty close to being able to put them out into the garden before you're starting to pot on everything, or you're going to fill all of your available spaces very, very fast. My seedlings move from here to being potted on, and then they are sitting outside. So if it's still quite chilly, particularly at nighttime, and I'm trying to get tomatoes or peppers or something like that started, they're going to be outside. They are protected from frost. It's nice and warm in the daytime, but they're going to be outside in nighttime temperatures. And they're not going to like that if I've got them out there too early, and it's going to slow down their growth. So I'm not actually gaining anything from getting them started too early. So I try to take a breath, to calm down, and to wait to start those summer crops until I know we're only about 6 to 8 weeks away from them going out into the garden. Whether you're in the Southern Hemisphere like me or the Northern Hemisphere, getting your green crops started now is perfect. It's going to give you salad and all sorts of delicious, crunchy vegetables to eat, whether it's the spring or heading into winter, and your chickens are going to love them too. Have your self-control for your summer crops if you're just heading into the spring now. I hope that has given you confidence to get started with seeds yourself. Just jump in, have a go, get good equipment, get good seed starting equipment, and remember, moisture, warmth, and light, lots of light. You can never have too much light. Your plants are going to love it.